Hello, I'm Declan Harvey. Our headlines. The government says it will try to block Gerry Adams getting compensation for being interned without trial in the 1970s.
We will look at every conceivable way to prevent these types of cases claiming damages, and it's important I say that on the record.
As the Health Minister Mike Nesbitt warns there is no money to fix the health service this year, we'll look at the numbers. It comes as one nursing home manager tells us she's frustrated at the lack of progress in the social care system.
It's been very slow. They know that social care needs to be reformed, but it's very slow. A lot of talking and not much action.
The inquiry into the planned Sperrins gold mine has been suspended again after departmental legislative breaches. Campaigners say they feel they're back to square one.
Work is halted on the demolition of the Boyne Bridge because of a planning breach. Meanwhile, this building was the scene of many historic events in Belfast. It now sits derelict, but has just been added to a worldwide watch list of at-risk heritage sites.
In sport, 3 Ulster men make the cut for the Six Nations as Simon Easterby names his Ireland squad, bidding for a 3rd successive title.
And it was mine today with plenty of clear blue sky and sunshine. Will it be the same tomorrow? I'll have the full forecast shortly.
Welcome to BBC Newsline on this Wednesday evening, 15th of January. The Prime Minister says the government will look at every conceivable way to prevent some of those who were interned without trial during the Troubles from getting compensation. One of them would be Gerry Adams. This photo of him is from 1973, around the same period as he was unlawfully detained at Long Kesh. Compensation was prevented under the Conservative government's Legacy Act, but could now be back in play for a small group, including Gerry Adams, if the law is replaced. Our crime and justice correspondent Julian O'Neill has our top story.
When Gerry Adams won a Supreme Court case quashing his convictions for attempted jail escapes during internment in the 70s, it opened the door to a damages claim. But it was slammed shut by 2 clauses inserted into the Legacy Act. The repeal of the Act is now underway at Westminster, and one of the first moves involves lifting the block to compensation.
Can I urge him to return to the previous cross-party position that we have to block compensation payments to terrorists such as Gerry Adams?
The problem is that the approach set out in the Legacy Act, in this respect and many others, has been found to be unlawful. Unlawful. Now, of course, as the last government did, we will continue to see if we can find a lawful way of dealing with the issue that he has identified, and that work will continue.
Mr. Adams's convictions were set aside because it was discovered his detention order, and hundreds of others, was not properly authorised. Parliament's response was to make the paperwork valid in retrospect, only for a court to declare it unlawful. So with the compensation clauses set to go, a payout to Mr. Adams seems possible. But a replacement hurdle may soon emerge in the form of new legislation promised this year.
The court found it unlawful. We will put in place this is a serious point, we will put in place a better framework. We're working on a draft remedial order and replacement legislation, and we will look at every conceivable way to prevent these types of cases claiming damages, and it's important I say that on the record.
There was cross-party opposition to this when it was first mooted, and we would expect the Labour government will ensure that that position is upheld, because if we move to a position where Gerry Adams is compensated in this situation, then really we have debased society to an additional level.
In a statement, Mr. Adams said, when the legislation is changed, there will almost certainly be further legal process in the courts before there is clarity. But no one should be surprised by a British government seeking to dodge its lawful and human rights responsibilities. If Mr. Adams were to obtain damages, it could run to a 6-figure sum. But it seems it's a cheque the government never wants written. Julian O'Neill, BBC Newsline, Belfast.
Despite knowing that our social care system needs reform, health officials are being accused of not doing enough, quickly enough and consistently enough. It's also been said that to make the changes required, there will need to be a shift in how funding is directed. That doesn't necessarily mean more money. As every day passes where community care is lacking, patients remain stuck in hospital beds, causing delays throughout the whole system. Our health correspondent Mary-Louise Connolly reports.
Michael's 80 and knows too well that he shouldn't be taking up a valuable nursing home place. But this is where he is being put as he awaits a care package.
I don't belong in a hospital now, as I am. You know, there's no point in me. If you want, there's nothing really wrong with me now.
At the moment, around 570 people are fit enough to leave hospital but can't, as the social care system is broken. There's also too few hospital beds. Unlike the rest of the UK, health and social care here are integrated, but staff in both hospitals and the community say there's little evidence that the two are working together.
I'm very frustrated. As a nurse, I went into nursing to care for people, and that is what we want to do. We want to provide the best care we can for people. It's been very slow. They know that social care needs to be reformed, but it's very slow. A lot of talking and not much action.
The Department of Health says its 3-year plan includes investment in alternatives to emergency departments. But those on the front line say there's been little strategic direction so far. Solving the hospital crisis lies here in the community, but that will require a change in focus and in funding social care. But senior health trust sources have told me they can no longer wait on that change in direction coming from the Department of Health, and instead are having to go it alone, which is neither strategic or cost effective.
I feel it's tightening on your arm.
The Hospital at Home scheme brings the service to the patient. Betty has a list of conditions. But with her things about her, she's happy physically and mentally.
I'm at home and they come to me and they are gems. I just can't praise them enough.
Here in the South Eastern Trust, just 15 people are receiving this service. It's fragile and without moving resources around, could just stop.
There are plans for expansion into Lisburn and Downpatrick, but we need funding.
And you need the funding, the forward thinking and the support from up above.
We do.
Send me the patient's details, please.
A different health trust and this direct assessment unit means patients can possibly be treated without attending. While it works, medics say all trusts should be working the same.
I think if we put all our efforts to work similarly for our patients, it's going to save time, effort and money.
While the Department of Health says there's no additional money for social care, those in hospital and the community advise that choices are based on what's actually needed and rubber stamped in a regional policy. Mary-Louise Connolly, BBC Newsline.
Money clearly seems to be a key part of solving the problems in our health and social care system. Today, the Minister said the Stormont budget, which was agreed before Christmas, doesn't provide enough to develop the sort of schemes Mary-Louise was just telling us about. That is despite his department getting more than half of the overall Stormont budget. Our Economic and Business Editor, John Campbell, is here. What are some of the numbers and how short does Mike Nesbitt say his department is?
The Department of Health will start the new financial year in April with a budget of about £8.4 billion. That's up by more than 2.5% compared to everything they will spend this year, and there's also going to be further top-ups likely through the financial year. However, Mike Nesbitt says there are also big cost pressures there. For example, meeting the cost of public sector pay deals, and also the fact that our ageing society means that the cost of delivering healthcare just goes up year on year. When you take all that together, Mr Nesbitt says that means that his department will be 400 million short of what he thinks it needs. About £200 million of that is going to have to be made up through the health trusts finding more efficiencies and more savings. And he says that just does not give him the room to manoeuvre to make the investment into new services.
I mean, needing more money is one view. Spending the money that's there more effectively, more efficiently, is the other. Did Mike Nesbitt say anything on that theme?
Well, certainly there have been expert reports saying that there are ways our health service can be run more efficiently. We know that people in the system say there are certainly ways it can be run more efficiently. But Mike Nesbitt was pushing back a bit on that today because he was saying, OK, we get people in the Assembly chamber talking about the need for transformation. That sounds vague. What exactly do they mean by that? And then at the same time, you will also get MLA, so anytime there are changes proposed to hospital services, they push back on that and protest and say, no, we can't do this. He says, what do you want? Transformation or not? If you want transformation, you're going to have to back me in it.
All right, John, thank you very much for that. I want to turn next to the plans for a gold mine in the hills of rural County Tyrone. As we reported earlier this week, a public inquiry opened in Omagh to look at the claims of the developer, who says massive reserves of precious metal would be of huge benefit to Northern Ireland, and balance that, of course, with claims of some locals who say a large mine would wreak havoc on their area, their water supplies and their air quality. Well, after just 2 days of hearings, the whole inquiry has been suspended again. Our correspondent Louise Cullen live in Omagh. What's happened, Louise?
Well, Declan, it became clear that the Department for Infrastructure hadn't notified the Irish government about the inquiry, which they should have done because it involves cross-border environmental issues. There was a lack of proper consultation with people living in County Donegal. And today, legal counsel confirmed that the department had breached its own legislation. All that, the Commissioner said, left her with no option but to suspend the inquiry, given the implications for people's access to justice. She said it was deeply regrettable that the appeal panel had been put in this position by the inaction of Stormont departments and their failure to follow their own legislative procedures.
Well, you're there, Louise. What kind of reaction have people had?
Well, there were gasps around the auditorium here in the Strual Arts Centre today as representatives from the Department for Infrastructure, from the developers Dalradian and others gave their thoughts on what had happened and what should happen next. There's going to now be what they're calling a midway hearing towards the end of March, but campaigners say they're back to square one.
It is extremely disheartening, but it's nothing new. It's seemingly par for the course. Unfortunately, that's the reality we're facing. It's disheartening, I suppose, morally when we're 2 or 3 days into an inquiry. We're kind of finding our feet to something that's new for all of us, people who've taken time out of their lives, time away from work, time away maybe from carrying responsibilities or duties to be here in person, to physically attend and get involved. And now the rug's been pulled from under us.
Louise, has the Department of Infrastructure said anything? And what does this mean money-wise? I mean, how much has been spent on this?
Well, the department said that the decision to suspend was a matter for the Planning Appeals Commission. Dalradian said they didn't want to comment today, but in her statement today, the Commissioner said that given the inquiry was previously suspended last year, she said the cost to the public purse was not to be understated, nor should the impact on local communities. We'll be back here in late March.
We're grateful, Louise. Thanks so much, live in Omagh for us. Now, the Economy Minister has welcomed a report into what convicted sex offender Michael McMonigal was paid from the public purse while working for Sinn Féin politicians. The report found yesterday McMonigal had, for a time, been claiming for up to 80 hours work per week, something it said was not reasonably possible. It also suggested it could amount to a misuse of public money and said the PSNI will now investigate that.
I'm very much welcome the report that's been published, and of course it only arrived yesterday, so we'll have to look into it. I know there's been a response already from the party to it. It moves on to the police now to deal with, and I think if there are further questions in relation to any matters in relation to that, let the police conduct their investigation.
Work on demolishing the Boyne Bridge in Belfast has been stopped. The site is being cleared to make way for the wider development around the city's new Grand Central Station. Some campaigners had fought to keep the bridge because of its historic significance, but now an issue with the planning process has arisen. Lindsay Telford explains.
At the end of November, work to demolish this historic bridge began. The road was closed and the diggers moved in. But all that stopped last month, and as of today, there's very little happening. We've seen a letter from Stormont's Departmental Solicitor's Office confirming that the demolition work has ceased. That follows a DFI investigation into the non-compliance of planning conditions, according to the letter. There are now hopes from some that the bridge could be saved.
The really important Harlan and Wolff work is still intact. Anything else that has been done can be repaired or reinstated, and if the bridge was listed, then that would be the end of story, and the traffic could progress, the pedestrians could progress, and everybody would be happy.
Today, a spokesperson for the DFI said officials were engaging with TransLink to discuss the steps which are necessary in order to comply with the relevant planning conditions. While there was clearly very little activity today, a spokesperson for TransLink insisted enabling work to facilitate dismantlement of the bridge continues and that its dismantlement would be carried out as quickly as possible. In the meantime, the closure of Durham Street, which the bridge once formed, has been creating gridlock in the city centre and affecting local businesses, including this tour operator.
It's either famine or feast, it's either a ghost town or total gridlock. So in the morning, total gridlock, nobody can get. Our customers are arriving 30 minutes late for a tour.
As for the bridge, for now, limbo. Lindsay Telford, BBC Newsline.
In an unexpected move, the rate at which prices are rising, inflation, slowed to 2.5% last month. That is good news for customers, perhaps, except businesses here are still warning they may have to increase prices this year. From April, they will be responsible for paying more national insurance per employee and also an increase in the minimum wage. One thing it's hoped will help our local economy is a growth in tourism. Here's our business correspondent, Clodagh Rice.
It's easier to talk about attracting visitors here when the sun is shining. Now we have a new 10-year plan to almost double the tourism spend here to over £2 billion by 2035. That's despite changes that came into effect last week with the introduction of electronic travel authorisations for non-EU visitors.
Well, that casts a cloud over that, there's no doubt about it, and we lobbied and we pushed hard right up to recent days and weeks in relation to trying to get the British government to back off that proposition. We will continue to lobby in relation to that, but nonetheless tourism has been growing. It's been growing across the island, it's been growing internationally, and we have the big events like the Open coming up, and we have to make the most of that.
It might be hard for some tourism businesses to think about where they'll be in 10 years' time when they're struggling with rising costs. That could have implications on their profitability, growth and survival.
I don't think this is going to be about visitor numbers. It's about some of the challenges we have is about businesses remaining profitable and businesses remaining in business. So what we can do to try and help that is to make sure they get as many customers as they possibly can through their doors, to make sure that we can provide volume that allows the turnover to cover the costs that they may be incurring, those additional costs.
Inflation, which is the rate at which prices are rising, fell to 2.5% last month. It was the first fall in 3 months and was partially driven by lower hotel prices. Today's inflation figures were a bit better than expected, and that should bring some relief in the short term. But it comes against a backdrop of warnings from firms here that they're going to have to put up their prices from April in order to cover rising labour costs. So that relief may be temporary.
What members are telling us that 9 in 10 of them are talking about having to increase their prices to match the costs, that their cost base is rising in relation to labour, in relation to employing people. There's also the ongoing battle that businesses have with absorbing the costs as they have done through the inflationary crisis.
Those working in tourism say even with price rises, visitors will still come.
People have to kind of make the business work and deal with that cost. And I still think Northern Ireland offers tremendous value for money right round the province.
The big question will be how much of these cost increases can be absorbed or mitigated by businesses and how much will then be passed on to the customer. Clodagh Rice, BBC Newsline.
4 off-duty police officers on trial over a late-night fight in a kebab shop did not identify themselves as officers at the time, a court has heard. The row happened 3 years ago, and 37-year-old Dean McCullum, 29-year-old Mark Fulham, Victoria Bell, who's 39, and 25-year-old Taylor Annett all deny the charge of affray. Catherine Morrison reports.
The 4 officers were off-duty and had been out celebrating a birthday. They said they'd each had around half a dozen alcoholic drinks when the fight broke out in a takeaway restaurant at the end of the night. Today, the jury heard police interviews with the 4 defendants where they were asked about what had happened during that altercation. One of the officers, Dean McCullum, said he had been trying to calm down a man who had approached him aggressively. He said, "There's nothing to worry about here, relax." But a struggle ensued. During that struggle, Mr McCallum admitted punching and striking the man, but he said it was an attempt to regain control of the situation and restrain the man. He said, "We managed to get him to the ground. I was shouting, 'Put your hands behind your back, put your hands behind your back.'" Mr McCallum was asked why he struck the man even as he lay on the ground. He said it was because he was continuing to struggle. The two other male officers also told police that they had struck the man too at different points in the altercation, but they said their actions were proportionate. None of the four defendants identified themselves as police officers during the fight. When asked why not, they said it was either because they didn't think to identify themselves or because they were worried it would make the situation worse. Catherine Morrison, BBC Newsline, Laganside Crown Court in Belfast.
7 weeks after the Irish general election, the two biggest parties have confirmed a new draft joint programme for government. Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin and Fine Gael leader Simon Harris will return to the top of the cabinet, but only with the help of a group of independent TDs. Our Dublin reporter Aoife Moore can tell us more with this. Aoife, how are things shaping up for, what will be the 35th Dáil?
Yeah, it's actually the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, the first and third most popular parties in the country, have reached a deal with the regional independents, and the two Healy-Rae brothers, Michael and Danny from County Kerry, they will now make up the next government. We will see Micheál Martin return as in his second term as Taoiseach. Simon Harris will go into the role as Taoiseach and take over that role in Minister for Foreign Affairs that Micheál Martin had, and then a number of junior ministries will go on then to those regional independents. A lot of them are well known around politics. A lot of them have been in the Dáil before. Some of them have been ministers before, but they have agreed to support this government for the next 5 budgets. But whether it's all plain sailing remains to be seen, Declan.
So they've set out their priorities for government. What are some of the highlights?
Yeah, we saw the programme for government today, and there were no big surprises, but some interesting things. So obviously, housing and childcare were the two big things that they campaigned on, and we saw a lot of that. There'll be expansion in housing schemes, a reduction to €200 a month for childcare, and more controversially, an agreement that they would try and implement the Occupied Territories Bill, which has been the source of some contention for a while in the Republic of Ireland.
Are there likely to be any changes, do you think, Aoife, in North-South relations?
Northern Ireland does get its own section within the programme for government. There is an agreement that they would spend $1 billion on the shared island unit by 2035. They would explore air connectivity between Derry and Dublin, but from what I've seen, there is still that big commitment to the Good Friday Agreement and improving British and Irish relations as well as North-South.
Aoife, we're grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
An historic building in Belfast city centre has been put on a world watch list of heritage sites that are at risk. We're talking about the assembly rooms near High Street in the city. They've sat empty for 2 decades, but do they now have a future? Robbie Meredith reports.
It's a jewel in the centre of Belfast, but today the 18th century assembly rooms lie empty and in danger. But they've been highlighted by the International World Monuments Fund organisation, alongside sites like the Chapel of the Sorbonne in France, Gaza's historic buildings, and the architecture of Africa's Swahili coast as among the world's most at-risk heritage sites.
Of course, people know and appreciate it locally, but actually an international audience is also finding this place really exciting, and there are many things that we can learn from it which go well beyond the sight and sound of the actual building.
The Assembly Rooms has quite a history. In music, it's where the famous Belfast Harp Festival in 1792 happened, which preserved the ancient tradition of Irish harping. It was also at a meeting behind these doors in the late 18th century that plans to expand the slave trade in Belfast were roundly defeated. Campaigners say the international interest should spark regeneration of the building.
I think it's a game changer. I think the powers that be and the community at large will recognise that this is a really serious project we're engaged in now.
Its future's not straightforward though. It's owned by the developers behind the city centre's Tribeca plans. They have said they're open to potential civic use. Belfast City Council say they're exploring the possibility of buying or vesting the Tribeca site. There's already a proposal to turn the building into a museum reflecting the more recent past.
It's been a risk for a number of years, but now what it changes is that a very prestigious, the most prestigious organisation in this area is choosing the assembly rooms in Belfast to protect it, to give us support in the next 2 years and to work together.
They're hoping the historic building's preservation for the public will soon get the green light. Robbie Meredith, BBC Newsline.
Ireland have named their squad for what could be a record-breaking Six Nations Championship. Nicola McCarthy is here with the sport. You've got names.
Yes, hard to believe it's that time again, Declan. We do indeed have names, with Ireland bidding to be the first side ever to win 3 in a row. Just 3 Ulster players have made Simon Easterby's 36-man Six Nations squad. Experienced pair Ian Henderson and Rob Herring are joined by Cormac Izuchukwu, who made his debut against Fiji last November. Leinster prop Jack Boyle, he comes in as the only uncapped player in the squad. Interim head coach Simon Easterby is stepping in to lead Ireland, with Andy Farrell focusing on the British and Irish Lions tour this summer.
Andy Farrell obviously brings out the best in these players and has done. His record speaks for itself, but you know, Simon Easterby's got a big job off the back of the teams that are playing really well. You know, they've got a number of players in there. Of course, I'm talking about Leinster. I always look at the squad initially from an Ulster perspective, just to see how many lads are in there, especially off the back of a number of poor performances and heavy defeats. Your sort of expectation levels aren't maybe where realistically they should be, but it's brilliant to see young Cormac Izuchukwu in there. Henderson played half decent there at the weekend against Leicester, and you know, I think there's 1 or 2 others that can maybe force their way in if there's a number of injuries during the course of the Six Nations, which, trust me, there will be.
Now, Rory McIlroy says he's disappointed his fellow Northern Irish golfer Tom McKibben is on the verge of making a move to the breakaway Live Tour. The world number 3 says he would make a different decision. 22-year-old McKibben is set to turn his back on a debut on the PGA Tour to join the Saudi Arabia-funded circuit.
I've known Tom since he was, 10 years old, 11 years old. And as soon as he got the offer, he rang me. We had a really good conversation, and all I could do is give my perspective. I really like Tom as a person, as a player. I think he's got a ton of potential. Look, I said to him, if I were in your shoes, I would make a different choice than the one you're thinking of making. Whatever the benefit may be, I don't think it's worth the sacrifice to what he's potentially going to give up.
Finally, in football, Northern Ireland will face Sweden in Stockholm on the 25th of March as Michael O'Neill's team prepare for the start of World Cup qualifying. And some breaking news this evening: former Aston Villa manager Carla Ward has been appointed as Republic of Ireland head coach. She replaces Eileen Gleeson. And that's your sport this evening.
Thank you very much for that, Nicola McCarthy. Let us take you to sunrise over the Foyle this morning. Absolutely lovely. Barra has forecast up a sleeve. What have you got?
A beautiful sunrise, beautiful day today. Yeah, lots of sunshine, but prepare yourselves. It's going to be a cold one tonight. The clear skies follow us in, and where we have the clear skies overnight, temperatures could fall close to freezing, especially in parts of County Down. As cloud increases though tonight, temperatures begin to recover by breakfast time, but nevertheless a cool start to the day tomorrow. But not a bad day. There won't be as much sunshine, but it's set to stay largely dry. Bit more cloud around, but still mild for the time of year. Maybe the likes of the Ards Peninsula, parts of County Down, holding on to quite a bit of sunshine through much of the day. Elsewhere, the cloud continuing to come and go. But that said, it's not going to be dull. It'll still be bright, and there will be breaks coming up through that cloud. So quite a few of us should get a ray or two of sunshine. Still a mild day, despite the sunshine for quite a few, temperatures of 10 or 11 degrees. Now, we have more cloud in the forecast tomorrow night, so it's not going to be quite as chilly, though that cloud acting like a bit of a blanket will keep temperatures at about 6 or 7 degrees. Parts of the west could see a little bit of damp weather too coming in with that cloud, not amounting to an awful lot, but it could be out there first thing, lingering for a while in the west on Friday morning. But for many other areas, a dry end to the week with sunshine coming and going. Like tomorrow, there will be bits and pieces of cloud, but we continue to see that mild air pushing northwards, being brought in by those winds. So on Friday, we're going to continue to see those temperatures comfortably reaching the double figures for quite a few. Over this weekend, well, we have very little wet weather in the forecast, maybe a chance on Sunday. Temperatures staying above average, dry into next week, but gradually turning a few degrees cooler.
All right, Barra, thank you very much. That is Wednesday's BBC Newsline. Your next update is at 10:30. We'll, all being well, see you back here tomorrow at 6:30. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.